Hello, hello, hello. This is Astrathane Podcast numero uno. Wanted to touch on a couple things from what I was talking about in my video earlier this week. A little bit more clarification since when dealing with things on astrology, there's almost an infinite amount of information you can get from it. So it's hard to cover everything. But one thing I did want to talk about was how when Neptune moves into Aries, Aries being, Aries, but there is a pretty substantial pronunciation of warfare in some capacity. It's not all limited to that. There's a lot more to it, but given the modern context of what's happening with the world today, we are currently going through a war. Now, there's a little bit of a pattern that could be happening because the last time Neptune moved into Aries, we had the start of the American Civil War. Pretty substantial, pretty big. But before that, at 164 years before that, we had the ending of the 9 Years' War. So what I'm hoping is that this war in Ukraine comes to a close one way or another, because it is a terrible, awful war. I have seen a good amount of the horrors that it has had to offer humanity, and everyone who sees and has seen it should and does wish it to be over. The human cost for nothing, essentially, needs to stop. And I have faith that it will. But I can't rule out the possibility that, because there is lots of people in Europe especially just beating on the drums of war, just calling for more war, like a bunch of psychopaths. So it's really hard to say. Honestly, it's balancing on the edge of a knife right now, and it could get a lot worse or it could get a lot better. We shall see. I am hoping that it will go better. So, another thing that I wanted to talk about was, I mentioned in the video that you've got the Sun conjunct Neptune on the 19th, this Wednesday. And then you have Neptune actually moving into Aries on the 30th. So between the 19th and the 30th, there's a window happening. There's a gateway, a portal, if you will, that it would be very wise for you to take advantage of, because this thing only happens every once in 164 years. No one you know, your kids might be alive. They might be alive at that point, but it's going to be multiple generations for this happens again. The world will be a completely different alien place from where we are now. And so it is a huge step, because Neptune is ending its cycle. It's dying. The death is happening, and a rebirth is happening immediately after that. And we're right on the cusp. We're right on that liminal space between the old and the new, especially for you. And Neptune has this tendency, spirituality in general, which is beautifully articulated through Neptune's symbolism. Because spirituality is a big gray sort of fantastical zone that is really hard to distinguish between what's real, what's practical, what's actually enriching in terms of spirituality, and what is fantasy, what is delusional, illusion. And that's really kind of the fundamental, or one of the fundamental aspects of spirituality, something that I swam around in myself, and a lot of people are lost in. Because we are inherently spiritual. Everything in this world is inherently spiritual. Just matters on whether what your perspective is. I believe that even the atheists is a faith in on itself. They have so much faith that there is nothing really out there. People who put all their faith into science. People need spirituality. They have to have it. And when they don't have it, they find, swimming through that sea of illusion, they find things to sort of fill the gaps. And a lot of times you get this anti-spiritual concept, energy, that can fill in the void. And what we've had recently over the past couple decades actually is this growing anti-spiritual movement, this growing anti-human in a lot of ways movement. And it's manifested itself in the extreme political left, the wokeism, they like to say. And it grew and it took hold, and it's sort of like a mind virus in a lot of ways. I know people from all walks of life, and all of them are looking at that mess and just thinking like, what is happening? But things are starting to shift. Things are starting to, it kind of like the pendulum swung really, really far, and it's stopping now, and it's getting ready to move back into the other direction. And I feel like what Neptune is showing us here in a lot of ways is that people need some sort of structured spirituality to them. As I'm talking like collectively. On an individual level, it's individualistic. Like, I have a spiritual practice that's different from somebody's, even though they look the same. But the masses, people need something. They need something to kind of keep them more stable, more of like they have a more of a concrete sense of who they are and their place in the universe. Because for all of our technological wonders that we live in this modern age, especially here in the West, but in a lot of other places in the world too, technology has essentially allowed us to conquer life. But we've paid for it with our souls, quite literally. We are spiritually retarded as a collective. And you can look at this. You can look around and you can see by our architecture alone. It is soulless, bland. It is like a negative space. It's like an anti-spiritualness to it. Just these cubes with these gray, flat, colorless, like corporate hellscapes. And not that long ago, we were creating immense, beautiful works of art in our architecture. And then we could go into the whys and whats of all of that, but that's not the point of this. I just wanted to bring up the fact that we were much more spiritually there. We had a much more healthier spiritual perspective on everything. Not saying we're perfect, but it's flip-flopped. It's like the complete opposite. Now life is easy because back then life was hard, and trial, challenge, strife, suffering, all those things build character. They create better people. And when we allow ourselves to sit at home and order everything to our door, some people don't even have to leave their fucking house to do anything, we get soft. We get really weak. Not to mention the social ramifications of, because this I could talk literally forever on everything that's happening with all this. The social media, especially for women, has been catastrophic. Just allowing everybody with unfettered access to just social platforms that were engineered to kind of fuck us up. There's a lot of problems here, and a lot of things need to be addressed. We are adapting to them, but not really at the same time. The humanity has been like taken out of its natural habitat and forced into what we have today, and it isn't working. It's not working. Like what the fuck are we doing as a species? Where are we going? What is happening right now? It's like we're just rolling around in the mud in a pitch black room, just struggling to figure out like what is even happening right now. Some people like Elon Musk want to fucking go to Mars for some unknown reason. I mean, let's be real here. He just wants to line his pockets and get more power like all billionaires do. But this notion of going to Mars is absurd. There's nothing there. It doesn't even have an electromagnetic field. Its atmosphere is actively blowing off into space. In a certain amount of time, there just won't be any more atmosphere. There's no hope of, like, it is a fruitless, pointless venture. And that's what a lot of people want to strive for. It's like, yeah, we're going to Mars just because we fucking can. It's like, yeah, well, it's a perfect reflection of what's happening now. Because right now, it's like humanity as a collective is like this super traumatized, mentally ill person. And we need to really focus inward towards ourselves before we really do anything. And this is happening naturally, I feel like, but it isn't our intention. So it's not working very well. If we were to like, I don't even know where you would begin on such a topic, collective therapy, like a collective conscious therapy. But it starts with people like you and me, realizing that everything is pretty fucked up once you really, really look down at what's going on. And there are good things in the world, but I feel like it's more important to dive deep, like all spirituality. That's why I have always had a really hard time fitting in with the spiritual, new age spiritual crowd, or just spiritual people in general. Because there's this toxic level of like focusing on only positive things. I've been kicked out of and banned from more in-person and online communities just for pointing out the truth of certain situations, which was deemed as negative, which is basically like, it's like you're an apostate in the new age sort of spiritual community if you aren't willing to just focus on nothing but love and light. It's heresy to do anything else. And I struggled because a lot of the spiritual gurus and coaches and shit that I went and saw, they weren't really willing to tell me what it was that I needed to hear. And it was frustrating. That's why I sort of was one of the reasons why I took up the mantle and started doing the work that I'm doing now. Because I feel like to be really and truly and honestly, to call yourself a spiritual person means that you are willing to dive headfirst into the abyss and swim around in that darkness and deal with and see the things that you don't want to see and don't want to deal with. 100%. And so I don't really like wasting my time on people who aren't really willing to do that. And I get some people are, where they're at, but I've been through some pretty dark like times in my life, and everybody has, and I'm not trying to compare myself to them and all that shit. All I'm trying to say is that I am lucky to be alive. That is how intense some of the shit that has happened to me in my life was. Like my life, if you can imagine, was like a jetliner, and the engine just exploded at one point, and I came careening down to earth and crashed in a giant fireball. That was my life at one point. And it took me like 10 years to fully recover, to fully heal from it, but I did. And I did because I'm the type of person where when something's wrong, I try to fix it to the best of my ability. I try to get in there, and I keep an open mind about how I can heal, because I know that I know nothing. I know nothing, and that somebody else out there might have something that could help me. You still got to be critical a little bit. You don't want to be like, you don't want to be doing some pretty gnarly stuff that people recommend online, like those. Well, I won't say that out loud. This is just some pretty crazy shit that people talk about online. But anyway, So what I'm here for and what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to work with people that are willing to actually get into the shit to fix themselves, to heal, to listen. Because a lot of people, that's one of the things that their egos just can't allow, is somebody else knowing what's best for them. And that is me, honestly. And I'm not just the only person ever. There's lots of people like me. But it's true. I can quickly get to know somebody better than they do, better than they know themselves. And it's hard for people to swallow that fact, and that I can just sit there and just say, well, you should do this and you shouldn't do that if you want whatever it is that you want. But a lot of people aren't really willing. I worked full time at a metaphysical store in San Diego, right near the beach. And there were a couple of clients that got what I was putting down, that really appreciated. There was this one lady who would come and see me every week. And she said that from the first session that I worked with her, just using tarot cards, she said she stopped talking to her psychiatrist because she felt like what I was doing was more effective than, and I get it, because psychiatrists, well, I guess it's not necessarily psychiatry in general, but there's an emphasis to keep people coming back and all that shit, which is a problem in the new age sort of spiritual movement with tarot card readers and shit. Because don't even get me started on that. I've worked with some really great readers and healers and spiritual teachers, gurus, and I've worked with a lot of really shitty ones. Really, really shitty ones. My favorite type of person is somebody who buys like an oracle deck and then immediately just starts charging people like $30 a reading, and all they're doing is fucking reading off the goddamn cards. It infuriates me. It infuriates me because I spent a couple years just giving free readings out to the public. I would go down to the beach. I would go to the parks. I would go anywhere public every week, sometimes every single day. And I would just put up a sign for a few hours and just gave people readings. And I did it consistently until people were starting to tell me that I should do this for money. And that was my go ahead. And actually the day after that happened to me, I had a lady literally just sit down and tell me to stop doing these for free and start charging for them. And I was like, okay. And then the next day I got a job on the spot at that same metaphysical store I was telling you about. So it's like I've lived it. I've been in it. I've met some pretty profoundly, really intensely crazy in touch psychic people. And I've met people that are just completely full of shit. And to most people, I can see how those would be hard to discern because, like I said, Neptunian sort of spirituality, it is difficult to discern what's real and what's fake. It dissolves those boundaries. And even I sort of question some things about some people. But one of the few things whenever I meet somebody who is doing some sort of healing work, either like remote, mediumship, tarot cards, whatever, I always ask them, I go, what happens when somebody comes to you and they have a legitimate mental illness? What do you do? And few of them, I've met a few of them that actually gave me a reasonable answer. But most people really kind of brush it. They don't really have an answer for that. They squirm because it's true. I've been doing this for 15 years now, and you will get a lot of people who are just mentally ill, who need professional help. And it's the person who's willing to tell them no, and that they need to get professional help, and I'm not willing to take your money. That's a pretty solid stamp of someone who's genuinely trying to help. And there are some people out there, but A lot of people will just say whatever it is that you need to see, to want, or they'll say whatever they think you want to hear. And I'm just not about that life. And I'm saying all this because Neptune, it's the whole New Age spiritual movement right now is this amorphous blob. It's like a whole bunch of rich executives got together and they were like, let's just create a religion. And so we have this highly sort of corporatized, at least the big names in, modern spirituality. And I'd like to see it change. I'd like to see it become something a little bit more concrete, but the people that are in charge of it right now, it's just way too stagnant. The whole energy is it's just too safe. It's just too pleasant. It's just like for many people, back to the Neptunian energy, it's an escape. It's just escapism. Most people just wear spirituality like it's and I'm not doing this to like toot my own horn and shit on other people. It's just, this is what's happening. And I feel like people could use some reality checks in a lot of ways, at least in terms of spirituality. I just don't know what that looks like. I can only work with people really one-on-one and teach what I know. But one of the things that this week, I'm going to be talking about life. The purpose of life, why we're here, what is life? It's not really that complicated. I could boil it down for you right now. Life is, for those of you, this is a big video game reference. A lot of millennials and younger should understand this, but life is a cosmic MMO. It's a PvP, PvE MMO. And for those of you who don't know what I'm saying, MMO is a massively multiplayer online. So there's just thousands and thousands of people in the game just running around doing their thing, questing, dungeons. PvP means player versus player, which means you just can go fight other players, kill them, they can kill you. Sometimes you get to take their stuff, whatever. And PvE is player versus everything, which is like you fight monsters. And so life is really just a grand video game for souls. It is a simulation. It's like a simulation, or it is a simulation, but we have such a limited vocabulary to describe a lot of these things, spiritual concepts. I'm sure like the Egyptian and like the Maya, they did. It's just an alien concept to us now, but we lack the terminology, the nomenclature. So when I say it's a simulation, it's more than that. It's just the only way that I can say anything to get you to understand. It is beyond a simulation. It is much more than that. It is like a higher vibrational simulation. It's supposed to be an illusion. That's its point. It's supposed to be this way because it allows sort of incorporeal consciousness, spirits, non-physical consciousness entities to incarnate themselves into this universe that has laws and restrictions, and it's heavy and it's harsh. And, there's multiple dimensions sort of bleeding into each other here, which is what we get. It's more than just the third dimension. It's much more than that. But that's the point. We are here to simulate, to forget where we came from, forget what everything else, just like we forget everything else in life. Video games are a direct reflection, especially MMOs. They're a direct reflection of life. It is the same exact concept, just grander and more intense in a lot of ways. And we come here for very specific experiences that we sort of design for ourselves. We go into these MMOs to do these quests, to do these things that we choose to do. And those things happen to us, and we call them fate, things out of our control. But we engineer this. We set this in front of ourselves and we forget. We have to forget. Otherwise, you would go mad and crazy knowing it all. Because trust me, I've been there. It's better to be ignorant about this shit. You want to just ride through. You don't want to have your eyes all the way open. That'll be for another video. I'll explain what I mean by that. But yeah, it's there for a reason. All of this is perfectly designed to be. It just makes perfect sense. And then we come here and we just fuck up a lot. we make mistakes. It causes a lot of pain. And we live or we die as a result. And we learn, hopefully. Some of us learn. Some of us don't learn. Some of us are pretty thick-headed. And the stakes are pretty high. So we, as our unique shards, our unique facets of consciousness, we will, you will graduate and move on and go somewhere else or move to another place and do another thing in another world. Or you get stuck here and you sort of not necessarily devolve, but you forget totally what's happening and you fail the exam. It's sort of like a bigger, grander way of sorting through what works and what doesn't work. But at the same time, it's all love. But again, the lack of nomenclature, we only have one word for love in the English language, and it's supposed to cover the numerous things that love has, but there's really a nuance to love, a lot of nuance. And if from a much higher perspective, looking down at what our earthly situation is, everything is love. Even the worst things imaginable is coming from a place of love. And it's hard to wrap your head around from our, earthly human perspective. But without trial, without tribulation, without some sort of resistance or some sort of opposition to pressure and push us and force us to change and grow, we would stagnate and devolve. And so this awfulness in a certain kind of way is from a loving place. And people play those roles. We work with each other. We coordinate. We do things for each other. Sometimes we play the bad guy for you. If you I really want to fucking test you, or you want to be tested, you want to be put through the ringer, then I would say yeah, I can do that for you. But it's going to be horrible. It's something that a lot of people cannot wrap their head around. But I feel like that's a true place of not necessarily enlightenment, but it is somebody with a much higher perspective on life. When you can look at life as this just big, grand, perfect symphony of school. It's just a big school. But anyway, I'm going to be doing a little video on that this week to break it down a little bit more and with a script, so it's a little more professional and I can articulate myself a little bit better. But there's a lot to learn here, folks. I got a lot to say. We will be getting to work. I'm going to be trying to come out with one video a week. I'd like to do a monthly reading of the energies of what's going on. Got a lot of big plans. I'm also going to be doing this podcast every week, sometimes maybe multiple times a week. But I think that's all I got for you today. Let me know what you think about this down below. And I will see you hopefully in the future.